Welcome to the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast with your host, Warren Maynard and John Beasley. Our mission is simple, inspiring men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most.
Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast. My name is Warren Maynard. I'm the National Director of Impact Players. And with me today is Lantz Howard. I'm so excited for you to be able to hear a little bit of Lantz's story, how he transformed through some of his own journey and experiences, and then the lessons that he's learned about creating a culture of intimacy in your marriage. You're going to be blessed. You're going to be grateful that you were a part of this podcast today. If this is your first time listening to the Impact Players podcast, Impact Players is all about inspiring men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most. And certainly one of those top relationships is the marriage relationship. So we've got a marriage expert with us today in Lantz Howard. A little bit about Lantz that I'd love to share with you guys before I turn it over to him. Lantz is a strategist. He's a coach. He's a mentor. He's been successful in a number of different fields, working as a professional coach, marriage therapist, organizational health guide for CEOs, business owners, and senior leaders. But he's also a man of faith. He's a man of wisdom. He's been married to his beautiful wife for how many years now, Lantz?
2 decades.
2 decades. He's got 4 beautiful daughters. But as we talk about all the time, there's always more to the story. And Lantz, I'm so excited for you to share your story and how God's brought you to this point, how the ups and downs of your life have brought you to this point to where now you get to share some of the lessons that you've learned about winning at home and winning at work and how other men can do that as well. So Lantz, maybe take a few minutes to share a little bit about your story.
Sure. Thanks, Warren, for the invitation, and I'm honored to serve you and the Impact Players and the Linking Shields. My story is really probably not going to be much different than a lot of men listening. On the outside, I was a seemingly good guy, the nice guy, but the reality is, looking back now, I was frankly like lonely as all could be. The truth is that I spent most of my occupational career up until a few years ago in vocational ministry. But my desire had always been to serve executive leaders, to be in a different role. What I've always said is a hybrid between John Maxwell meets a John Eldridge. But when I said that over 15 years ago, I had no idea what that meant. Looking back really right now, it's God's maturation process that I had to go through in order to be doing what I'm doing today. And still learning, still growing, and still trying to figure this out as I serve faithful men who are seeking to do better in all arenas of life. In particular, my story goes back to my perception of doing executive coaching was, well, I have to become an executive leader, and I have to have some executive role inside the church organization, the nonprofit world. So I did what I thought I needed to do. But the truth is, even though I was gifted in that role and I was developing leaders, there was a season that I was just outside my alignment, outside my zone of natural gifting or God-given identity. The more I was being asked to do spreadsheets and Excels and money and finances, that just wasn't me. But that led to misalignment with some of the leaders, and really a very struggling, difficult season. And looking back now, I just wasn't unable to name my identity. I wasn't able to name my true emotions. I remember being in the kitchen one morning At that time, the girls were young, uh, and I'm like, man, how am I this alone? I've got everything going my way.
Mhm.
I got the job, the perceived job that I thought I wanted, but I'm just lonely as I could be. Uh, that led into what I call more fragmentation because I fear being found out. And so
Mhm.
instead of naming the emotions and
Mhm.
bringing those into the light and confessing the truth, I chose to hide. And it wasn't some like grievous perceived moral failure or sin that I was hiding from. I was just hiding from myself, and I didn't
Mhm.
want to be found out to be weak or incompetent.
Mhm.
And so instead of approaching some leaders, my wife and I did prayer, fasting, all the supposed Christian good guy things. But really, um, my moment of inflection, I say it out loud now and it just sounds ridiculous and people will laugh as they hear it. I wrote a 15-page letter of resignation of just saying, hey, I'm done with this organization. I'm out of here years and years ago. Uh, and that led into an 18-month wilderness season of God's really maturation process in me and through me. Even though I made that step in faith, I did not learn as a man of what it meant to be a man to my own word and have the courage for myself on the behalf of the team to really speak truth into the organization, to speak truth into the system, to allow it to be healthy and to be a part of health going forward. All I saw was the pain that I was causing myself or the perceived pain that the organization was in, and I just hit the eject button. Um,
Mhm.
and so, through that period of the wilderness season that I talk about, my wife and I had already discovered the Enneagram and I had already been on that journey for a while, but my wife hadn't really joined me on it. And then we were driving back from West Texas. It was about a 6 hour drive back to the North Dallas, Texas area. And she discovered her Enneagram type in a 6 hour audio that we were listening to. And Warren, I tell you, in that moment, I saw the tears streaming down her face, all the four girls in the back of the van. And it was the first time that I realized I was lacking connection. I was lacking a sense of empathy because as an Enneagram 9 type, and she was an Enneagram 6 type, all she saw was that her world was falling apart.
Mhm.
And I wasn't stepping into the space of leadership, of coming up with a clear plan and following this plan. All I knew is like, it's going to work out. And she's like, I just need a plan. I trust you, but I just need a plan.
Mhm.
And it was a deep self-awareness moment for me that even in the midst of a good marriage,
Mhm.
there is a lot of room and a lot of work that has to take place in order to go to the next level for a great marriage. And in that moment, I just realized like something has to continue to change and transform me if I want to go to the next level, if I want my marriage to go to the next level. And so it's been a continual journey of maturation and growing and learning and guides and re-engage processes and regeneration group development and hiring executive coaches. Like this isn't a nice bound up story, right? I even signed up for something this morning because I am constantly serving other leaders
Mhm.
and I have to be on the receiving end of being developed myself. And so I signed
Mhm.
up for some more leadership growth and development and formation in me because I am a man in process and I'm a man who is becoming. I pray more and more like this mind of Christ and the spirit of Christ that
Mhm.
he has been given to us.
Wow, Lance, thank you so much for sharing. And there are so many pieces to your story that I just want to like pull on a string and kind of go into deeper. And, I think first of all, if anybody were to look at your you know, LinkedIn profile or see the photos of, you and your wife or, your family online, it would be very easy for someone to go, oh, they're the perfect family or they've got everything together. And, you talked about that kind of divided life, that there was something that you were, afraid of. There was something that was kind of keeping you from allowing yourself to be fully known, fully exposed to the world. We talk a lot about this in Impact Players, the idea of audacious authenticity, that, we want to be so audaciously authentic that we're tearing down imposter syndromes and masks and just being completely real. But that's a hard thing for most men to do. Um, and as we're talking about this idea of marriage today and cultivating a culture of intimacy in marriage, walk through a little bit of like the journey that you were on, and how were there times where, because of this divided sense of self that you were having, were there times where you were kind of pushing your wife away, or did this come about because you were inviting your wife in during these seasons of, self-doubt or questioning? What was that dynamic like for you and for your bride as you guys walk through your journey of growth individually?
Yeah. I definitely don't think it was any pushing away. I mean, there was great communication, a great level of awareness of like, hey, something's got to change in this
Mhm.
organization and you, and like it's just not healthy for our family. At that time, I was in my, mid 30s. I ended up with shingles, ended up with high blood pressure, and it's just like, okay, these are signs that the body is signaling like something's not right, something's got to change.
So
Uh,
your wife was the one that was saying, Lance, like something's got to change. You're not healthy. We're not healthy. Like we got to figure. She was vocalizing some of those concerns.
No, she wasn't. I think it was just a known. It was just a given. But
Mm.
but we didn't really know what change looked like, right? Change is hard. That's why people don't change.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's easier. I mean, that's why people hate their jobs and hate what they're doing because of the fear of changing and the pain of it is just far, far grander. Like, right? That's why there's so many people overweight because they hate changing.
Hmm.
The process of changing is just too difficult. Our awareness was there in terms of our communication together,
Hmm.
and even journaling together, praying together, fasting together, inviting people into this conversation and going to other people's house and having them pray with us and over us who knew the
Hmm.
circumstances. In particular, as far as it relates to intimacy, one with myself and intimacy with her. And there's many domains when I say intimacy. So any men who are automatically going to sexual intimacy, yes, this is one aspect, but that's not the only aspect.
Right.
And so on two fronts, I want to model kind of what I do in my coaching practice as I serve men. One is being aware of the emotions that are driving the behavior. Oftentimes, men can only name two realities of what's going on. Well, I'm either angry, or I'm sad. I've got the blues, right? And so,
Mhm.
but the truth is, those are not emotions. Those are external realities, and that men are afraid of having this emotional conversation because they're like, oh, that's weird. That's woo woo. Why are
Right.
we talking about emotions? Emotions are God given, and how we respond to them and steward those emotions is up to us, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, I'm 30 minutes from the Oklahoma, well, 30 plus minutes from a casino in Oklahoma, right? And so, as an example, a lot of men would say, well, I'm going to go and gamble, X amount of dollars and lose money and go more in debt this weekend. Well, that's just an external reality of some inside hurt that is actually going on, right? And this isn't about gambling being right or wrong. This is a example. And so when I think about intimacy and my wife and what was going on in that season's not much different from the current season I'm in.
Mhm.
So I have to name what I feel oftentimes is I feel insecure. One, sometimes I
Mhm.
feel insecure in the context of a relationship, whether it's pursuing my wife and the possible fear of rejection with a sexual preference, desire, want, or need.
Mhm.
Or I feel insecure because my perceived value is tied to a dollar amount that I have in my head given to me by the world that it's like, okay, well, that's what success means. So even in my very deep, deep, painful season, I had this perception of, well, I'm not getting that dollar amount. And so some of the pain was revolved around, I just feel really insecure. Right,
Mhm.
but if we keep unraveling the story, there's stories that go back into coming from a broken home. Right, my dad wasn't around,
Mhm.
and we ended up in a court battle in one particular season of my life, and it was over child support. And so, like, right, I have these narratives all throughout my life of nobody's going to show up, nobody's going to provide. I have to do it. I have to provide. I've got to pull myself up by my bootstraps.
Mhm.
But as soon as I say I feel insecure and tie whatever the insecurity statement is around that, then all of a sudden, all I've done is I'm practicing confession. I'm
Mhm.
practicing telling the truth. We get mixed up when we start to think uh, the external reality is the sin.
Mhm.
The sin is just emotional misalignment with God-given identity and truth upon your life.
Mhm.
When I sin, it's not because of some external behavior that I do, of writing a 15-page letter of resignation.
Mhm.
The sin is just being out of alignment with how God sees you.
Yeah.
He sees me as secure. He sees me as valuable. He sees me as enough. And so if I can learn to see myself that way, then I'm able to show up in a relationship in a stronger way, not only to organizations and those that I lead, but I'm also able to show up in a stronger way to my wife, to serve her and my family, and to lead them as well. So hopefully just one, the nuance of unpacking my story, but also modeling what some of this language sounds like is helpful to those listening.
No, that's so good. And that really resonates with me as I think about even my own personal journey in marriage and self-discovery and all those kind of things. I think maybe what you and I have in common is that we both really kind of gravitated to the desire to be the good guy, to be the nice guy, to be liked by the people around us. In some ways, to be not only a good guy but the God guy as well. And that, like, when people thought about, you know, who's a man of God that I know, that they would think Lantz Howard or Warren Maynard, that would be the way that we try to identify ourselves. And I think for me, what maybe where I struggled more than it sounds like you did was I really struggled to acknowledge what my emotions were to my wife because I thought that the way that I was supposed to be a good husband and to be a God guy was to always have the God answer at all times and to never acknowledge the humanity part of me that I am a human being that if you cut me, I bleed, that I can experience senses of anxiety, discouragement, insecurity, weakness, confusion, doubt, depression, all of those things that, every single one of us experience. And yet, as men, sometimes we think that we're doing the people around us a favor by suppressing all of those things,
Mhm.
so that they can look to us and see nothing but strength.
Mhm.
And of course, it's a faulty picture of what strength really is,
Sure.
because it takes a lot more strength to admit that you're weak. And of course, the Apostle Paul talked about that it's actually in our weakness that Christ's strength arises within us. Um, But I'm really inspired by the way that you've been able to describe that journey. And by doing that, you were able to invite your wife into some of those difficult moments. And I think that's, guys, like if you want to take a step of growth, listen to what Lance is saying here, because it really is the way to lead, is to lead through being able to share with your wife when you're struggling and how you're struggling, and inviting her to be a part of that with you. Not to say that you just dump all of your problems every single day on her, but that you invite her in to those feelings. So let's talk about this cultivating a culture of intimacy in marriage a little bit more. Um, the truth is that there are a lot of marriages where there is some major intimacy blocker. Maybe like me, it was an inability to express what was happening within me to my wife. For other guys, it could be, an unhealthy coping mechanism, whether that's, pornography, sexual addiction, gambling, workaholism, materialism, or it could be just that there's a lack of communication and spiritual unity with one another between you and your bride. So maybe just kind of unpack what some of those driving forces are, and what happens to the marriage that is not experiencing the intimacy that God designed for husband and wife.
I think the simple way to think about it is connection, disconnection, separation, belonging. And when we're operating out of this place of connection, right, there's a lot of growth that can come in the context of our marriage. But when we're operating out of disconnection, it feels incongruent, right? But this is Adam and Eve's story. Like, right, when they're connected with each other and with God, then things are flourishing. But when they're disconnected, it hurts and there's pain and there's shame involved. And so I think in my personal experience and all the various business owners, executives, senior leaders that I coach, there is oftentimes just this lack of awareness of what's going on in the disconnection realm, the separation realm, meaning this is common language that I hear. I feel burnt out. I don't know how to have empathy with my wife. Uh,
Mhm.
and especially men in their 40s and 50s, everybody just seems to be running at a frantic pace and is incredibly overwhelmed and taxed out on their calendars.
Mhm.
And so, unfortunately, I think what's happening in a lot of bedrooms is that intimacy, sexual intimacy, is happening in our perceived quick fix mindset,
Mhm.
right? It's only in a few minutes, and so it's a transaction instead of this transformational, deep connection and process that one our wives are longing for. Our wives are not the ones saying, "Hey, let's make this quick." Like it's our need in this external reality. I mean, it's not any different than going to the casino.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, it's like, well, I had an orgasm and I'm done, right? But the truth is that our wife wants emotional connection. She wants to be seen. She wants to belong. She wants to feel connected. But oftentimes, unfortunately, many men are just unable to offer that strength. We're unable to offer a sense of curiosity and questions and to sit with her story and to sit with her longings and desires. We go into fix it mode. And so that's in my experience is what's going on in marriages that we're unable to just sit and to be with one another.
Mhm.
And so part of the process is learning to grow yourself up. Um,
Mhm.
it's not your wife's responsibility to do that. The more that you can learn to stand in what I call a circle of change, uh, and allow her to stand in her circle of change, and those overlap, but it's not your role to put your foot in her circle. It's not her role to put her foot in yours. All
Mm,
you can do is use the mirror of what's going on in y'all's relationship to grow yourself up. In God language, this is called sanctification. So I think it's really
mm,
God's greatest gift to men if we're allowing ourselves to be growing up in this
mm,
path. But fear, shame, rejection, those things hurt. And
mm,
so the more of those stories that we compound over the series of life, and the more that we compound in the context of our marriage relationship, man, it's just hard to recover from that. And so that's why I hear story after story of like, man, we haven't had sex in 6 months. We haven't
mm,
had sex in 8 months.
mm,
We had sex 3 times this week, and all together it lasted 7.5 minutes, right?
mm,
Um, so that goes back to what I was modeling earlier. Is like I feel insignificant.
mm,
I feel like a failure. Naming those things is not a position of weakness. Naming those things is a sense of agency, a sense of power, and
mm.
a sense of like, oh, all of a sudden I'm seen. All of a sudden I belong. All of a sudden I can give space to her story and she can start to see me as a real human as well.
Welcome to Impact Players, where we inspire men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most. Are you asking yourself, how do I become a better man? How can I grow as a husband and father? Can I succeed both at work and at home? We believe the answer is yes. Impact Players provides rock-solid answers and practical tools for men who want to improve in every area of life. Whether you're single, married, a new dad, or a grandfather, our men's groups, leadership training, and resources will help you thrive. Recent studies show men are struggling more than ever. That's why Impact Players is here. We offer cohorts where you can connect with real men like you, courses with actionable steps, and a nationwide community dedicated to winning at home and at work. Join our online community today and access a wealth of materials designed for your growth. Transform your life, impact your family, business, and community. Ready to get started? Visit impactplayers.org now. Be the man you are destined to be with Impact Players.
That's so good. And I know that resonates with a lot of men that are a part of Impact Players and are listening to this podcast today. You know, I want to make a statement and I'd love for you to kind of unpack this for us, but I believe that there is no intimacy without intentionality. In other words, you don't drift into intimacy with your wife. Someone has to take a step towards intimacy. Either that's you or it's your wife.
Yep.
And here at Impact Players, we tell men that they are called to be thermostats, not thermometers.
Yep.
So, if your wife is cold to you, it's not a thermometer gets cold in response,
Mhm.
but a thermostat starts adjusting the temperature, making
Mhm.
it warm. And so, men, we want to call you, challenge you to be the ones to take that first step, to be the ones to be intentional. And so, I'd love for you just to walk us through what are some just super practical ways that men can be intentional in different ways. It could be, it doesn't have to necessarily be in, the sexual or the romantic, but just in different areas of life. What are some practical ways that men can be intentional to create and to facilitate intimacy with their wives?
Mhm. Warren, even the example that you use there, the thermostat and thermometer, I mean, that comes from a systems organizational health perspective, right? And so, as a trained marriage therapist and now as an executive coach, serving an enterprise level organization this week and their team, it all comes back to emotions. One of my favorite authors, leadership books of all times that few people will choose to read because it's a difficult read, from uh, the Rabbi Edwin Friedman, Failure of Nerve, Leadership in the Age of the Quick Fix. He talks about all leadership is an emotional process. And so once we understand that this thermostat that you're talking about, thermometer that we're talking about, that we're existing inside of a container or an ecosystem, we can begin to, okay, if it is true that all of leadership, both at home and work, is an emotional process, I have to start to become aware of my emotions. And that means, for example, practical speaking, I have to learn to be the calmest person in the room. And
Mm.
so how do I be the calmest person in the room? The only way I can do that is being self-aware. I mean, whether you read John Maxwell or Harvard Business Research, they all say the same thing, that all great leaders are self-aware.
Mm.
And so even working with the leader this morning, we were walking through some of the very components that I'm talking about. He named something out loud and said, well, this is why I do this, this, and this. And all of a sudden it was like this new insight was like, oh, what I just shared about home actually applies to every other circumstance that's actually going on. Right. So insecurity, insignificant, not enough, failure, all these things are the same stories that are playing out in relationships. Right. And so other practical examples, this is my probably one of my favorite practical examples. Uh, Going back to standing in your circle of change, it's called the 20-second hug. Um, David Schnarr's Passionate Marriage was the first place I actually learned about this. Is that if you, I know we can see each other, so I'm modeling this, but if if you can stand with your spouse and just say, "Hey, I want to begin to experiment with the 20-second hug."
Mm.
I heard this on some random podcast with Impact Players and Warren, and I don't know. It sounds like it'd be fun. So just basically, you're just learning to stand in your circle, and you're learning to accept her in her circle,
Mm.
and you're embracing for 20 seconds. Oddly enough, I've heard from a lot of men that it's very difficult because, right, if they're going back to connection and disconnection, if there's those things are lagging, it
Mm.
is very difficult because all of a sudden it's heart to heart, right? It's not this intellectual head to head exercise anymore. It's like literally heart to heart. And so if you want to spice things up in the bedroom,
Mm.
first begin to practice this 20-second hug in the kitchen.
Mm.
Um, and there's some nuances and things you can learn about each other, like who lets go first and who's like leaning on each other. And all those things are self-differentiation, which we don't have to really chase. But that's a very practical one that is a gift for men to be like, hey, uh, let's do this 20-second hug. You don't have to name it. Don't be weird or awkward about it.
Mm.
Um, on my podcast, Wholehearted Leadership, I ask every guest, like, hey, what's the last date night that you went on or intentional time?
Mm.
Those things have to be in the calendar.
Yeah.
Um, if they're not, they just have to get there. So those are some very practical things. Um, and I would just offer just a posture of curiosity.
Mm.
The more curious that we can be with ourselves, with people, with our wives, the more fun that all of this is. Like, right, if we treat it as a linear process, some steps to follow, there's really honestly no growth in that. But if we're curious um, with her story, with our story,
Mm.
and then what God is doing in the midst of those, there can be a lot of fun things that happen.
It's so good, and I resonate with all those. The 20-second hug, we love that. The date nights, of course, the sharing of the emotions. That's something I've learned and worked on a lot over the last several years. I love that idea of being curious. I think, I've been married to my wife. It'll be going on 28 years this August. And we grew up together. Like we got married, we started dating when we were 19 and we got married when we were 21 and 20 years old. So it's easy, I think, to at some point kind of believe that you know everything about your spouse. And that it's a wonderful thing to say, like, my wife knows everything about me, but also there can be a sense of like when you lose that curiosity, you lose the desire to really know her more deeply and lean in. It's like I've already heard all this, I already know all this. That's not the posture that you want to be in if you're trying to promote intimacy in your marriage. So I love that idea of just staying curious about one another. um I think, like, when we talk about the mission of Impact Players, inspiring men to be great husbands, what we're really saying is we don't want to just have a mediocre marriage. Like, okay is not the goal. Like, we want to have a marriage that is firing on all cylinders. And so maybe just kind of describe for men what that might look like. Like, what is a marriage that is firing on all cylinders really look like? And maybe by describing that, it gives men an opportunity to kind of think about what are some areas in my marriage that are not firing on all cylinders that I can give greater attention to, now that I kind of am thinking about going beyond just the ho hum, routine, like, you're just living in the same house together, trying to get the kids from point A to point B every single day of the week. So, yeah, maybe just kind of describe, what does that look like to have a marriage that's firing on all cylinders?
Sure. I think it comes back to vision. In
Mm,
particular, we are the only ones that know our desire, wants, and needs. And unfortunately, what happens in a lot of good guys, a Christian nice guy, is we have these hidden covert contracts that are going on
mm,
in our relationships, thinking that the other person on the receiving end knows my desires, wants, or needs just because of the way I'm communicating. But unless I am clear, direct, and kind with my language, expressing desires, right? Desires in the bedroom, desires outside the bedroom, my wants, my dreams, my hopes, my goals. So it all comes back to vision. So we've got to have some way to paint the future. Unfortunately, right, going back to what you were saying, we in general will settle for mediocre uh,
mm,
because dreaming again takes work. It's because we've have experienced disappointment, we've experienced failure,
mm,
and so unless we can realize that the God is a God that continues to co-create, that continues to dream, uh, then we can begin to march towards, okay, like this is what it looks like to have a marriage firing on all cylinders.
mm,
Several years ago, my wife and I, we worked on our values together, coming back in particular from a marriage adventure. And I realized just a few months ago that it was time to recalibrate around some of those. So we, as a family, have actually been recalibrating
mm,
around our values. And so we've been going through a value exercise. I mean, I can literally go into the kitchen right now and you can see all of our papers. So we've worked on that. We've had language around that. We have some verses around that. But right, it's a co-creating process of what makes our
mm,
family unique.
mm,
And within that, of course, everybody has their own stories about, okay, how has God wired you and how do we honor that value inside of this family system? And so with that, we've articulated a vision that we want to start working towards. And so we're in the final stages and steps of this. It's not anything that we've been trying to do overnight.
mm,
And so, right, you've got to have a vision. You got to have some sort of values and behaviors that you come to back to. Because if you don't know your vision, you don't know your values. Values that actually just mean your behaviors, how you're going to act with one
mm,
another, and the container, the ecosystem that you want to actually flourish in. But other than that, I would hesitate to say this is what it looks like, right?
mm,
Because all of a sudden, people are gonna be like, well, okay, well, how does a family devotional work? Or,
mhm,
okay, you want sex 3 times a week? Or, hey,
mhm,
well, why do you get to go on marriage weekend getaways every 6 weeks with your wife? Well, it's going to look different for every
mhm,
particular higher desire, lower desire, right? There's
mhm,
so many nuances that we have to be mindful of. But I think that's where it goes it's back to, those that are seeking God and all this is to say, God, what do you want me to know about my role in all this?
Mm,
And then what do you want me to do? And if
mm,
I can answer those two questions every single day, every single moment, then I think God is going to see a faithful man. And over time, there's going to be fruit that is produced
mm.
from those seeds that you're putting in your family.
Wow, that's probably a great way to summarize that question is, the marriage that is firing on all cylinders, it's producing fruit.
Mm,
I think that's like you said, getting away from some of the more um, culturally recognized types of standards like, oh, we do this, 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 we live here, we drive this, all those kind of worldly type of pictures, but to say, yeah, a healthy tree produces healthy fruit. A healthy marriage should be producing healthy fruit. And so, the fruits of the spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That sounds like a pretty good marriage to me. If you are seeing those things coming out of the two of you, extending into your family, and then going even further into your community, your church, your workplace. That's a pretty nice definition
mhm.
of a successful marriage in my book. So great thoughts on that. I want to throw one curveball question at you here. So I'm curious if your wife were to, um, you know, come on to this podcast, um, what do you think she would say is the most important um, nugget that she thinks every guy who has kind of walked through or is walking through some of the things that you described at the beginning of the podcast should know? Like, again, going back to where you were earlier in your story when you were talking about not really being satisfied with where you were, feeling like you were out of alignment, feeling like you weren't fully, letting yourself be known, and you were trying to be a nice guy, but you weren't really, being true to yourself. What do you think your wife would say to guys that they might need to hear on that subject?
Well, this is what she would tell me. I don't know what she would tell everybody else, but there's probably some insight and learning there.
Hmm.
Yesterday was a difficult day for her, and I'm not speaking on her behalf or her story, um, but we were on the back patio and I was massaging her foot, and I was just creating space for her to listen,
Hmm.
for me to listen. And when we're done, she gets up and, before she goes back into the house, she's about to cook dinner. She's like, "Hey, thanks for listening."
Hmm.
So, as simple as it sounds, and as I don't want to even sound um, overly spiritual, but like Jesus modeled this for us. He
Hmm.
asked questions. And that's why, man, I love this God-given season and alignment that I'm currently in, is that the posture of what I do is I just get to ask questions. I'm not the know-it-all and I'm not the fix-it guy. And so the more that I ask questions, the more space she feels safe, right? So I think that would be one thing. A second thing I think she would begin to say is just like, hey, provide a little bit of clarity, a little bit of a plan. She's like, I trust you,
Hmm.
but whether it's finances or the vacation, whatever it is, provide a little bit of leadership, provide a little bit of structure and saying, hey, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, and this is how it's going to end, right? Um, and then after that, have fun, have
Hmm.
fun together. Like, uh, I think about this often because I think it's so missing oftentimes from my own life, and so that's why I kind of reflect it back. But several months ago, a year ago, I had John Eldridge on the podcast, and going back to the question I ask everybody, he said we've got to have fun. Like
Mm,
so creating environments to play and be creative together, go to the beach together, go on a walk. I mean, you'll see us outside walking up and down our street, going to the lake by our house. Just have fun. Like we're
mm.
so wound up.
Yeah.
Like just everybody chill out and learn to relax and go have fun. It doesn't have to be perfectionism, right? And even as I name that's one of those emotions. Like, man, I just feel like things have to be perfect. They
Hmm.
don't. They don't. Just relax and learn to have fun.
Mm.
Uh, and it may make your marriage a little bit lighter as you learn to have fun and realize it's not all about performance and striving and perfection. It's just the joy of belonging in a relationship with other people. And praise God for the marriage process that grows us up on this side of the cross.
Amen. Amen. Well, Lance, thank you so much. It's been so inspirational and just helpful to hear from you. And you're one that's not only speaking from your own personal experience, but this is something you do professionally, is to coach men and help them to become better husbands and to thrive in the workplace as well as at home. And so, share a little bit about what you do, your services, and how men can follow you or follow up on the work that you're doing.
Sure. Well, Warren, I'm honored by the gift to be here today. So thanks again for the invite. Uh, my stewardship is really to create space for other men to be strengthened and restored. I do that through executive coaching. Call it whatever you want to call it. I'm creating space for people to flourish as God has designed them to flourish. And I believe all of our role, not just me as a coach, but all of our role is that the more that I can reflect back the way that God already sees you
Mm,
as whole, as his child with unique gifts and identity and calling, that's really what I'm calling out. So whether I'm serving an owner operator of a
mm,
Chick-fil-A or whether I'm working with a billion-dollar organization, my role is to facilitate health. And healthy organizations drive healthy teams, and healthy teams drive healthy results, and cascades all the way to the home. So
mhm,
family business owner, plumbing company with 70 plus employees, right? Or sometimes it's a corporate pilot that I'm serving. These are all people that I'm currently working with and being in a relationship with. And so I'm just thankful to have a seat at the table because in the process, I'm the one that actually ends up growing alongside all these amazing
mhm.
clients who are actually friends.
Yeah. That is the secret joy, isn't it? That
Uh,
by serving others, by helping others work through their, journey, it gives us greater clarity as to who we are, what has called us to do. So I'm truly grateful to be able to share in those same types of experiences with other men. Lance, this has been so great. Thank you so much for being a part of the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast. I hope we'll be able to have you on again in the future. And if the opportunity presents itself to be able to have you, speak at one of our Impact Players breakfast gatherings, perhaps in the Dallas area or somewhere else in the country or for a retreat or something like that down the road. It's really been a blessing to have you be a part of this with us.
well, thank you, Warren. Stay the course, and there's a lot of work to be done out there.
That's right. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you for joining us for the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast. We hope you're inspired to become a better husband, father, and leader. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a 5-star review, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Stay connected and continue your journey with us. Visit impactplayers.org for more resources and updates. Thanks for being a part of the Impact Players community. Keep thriving in the relationships that matter most.